Three new EC members. CODEO, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, is led by credible clergy to demand resignation of two of Akufo-Addo's appointees. They show us the evidence the NPP ignores or tries to justify so very hard, which they suggest will destroy the EC and endanger this democracy. Three new taxes to raise 4 billion will increase the tax burden on businesses to collapse even a lot more businesses. In addition to all taxes, businesses are to pay more of a part of their profit to government. Someone says, now it is like working for the government. Businesses are agitated. But how else shall we come out of this broke economy? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. As always, I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. And this morning, we will be asking the business people why they have been so agitated about the three new taxes introduced by government for the purposes of raking in what we are told about 4 billion to be able to help this economy in the recovery process. What exactly are their concerns? They have a plethora of issues, including suggestions that these taxes will rather collapse more businesses. There's quite a number of businesses that have gone down already. But so how do we go about reviving the economy, apart from going to China and the Paris Club and others to beg for debt forgiveness and some debt arrangement? What can we do beyond the little haircut that we are taking back at home? Then we have CODEO, the CDD. We have also political watchers who will look at the issue of the three new appointments to the Electoral Commission, and two of them particularly have come up for discussion. It does appear that discussion will not die anytime soon. And CODEO is asking simply that it looks almost impossible that the president will listen to good advice and revoke the appointments of the two. So they are appealing to the two to resign. Will they resign? Well, the NPP has every reason to justify the issues that have come up. Plain, open partisanship that the people stand for, and the compromise that they stand to make to the Electoral Commission, tainting its independence and neutrality. It doesn't matter to the party at all. It doesn't matter to the government that we're going to yet another election, and that the Electoral Commission needs to keep a certain attitude, a certain outlook. Justice Sophia Akufo, among others, have some questions to raise. Some are asking, why did the Council of State approve of those people in the first place? We will deal with all of that. I'll introduce my guest to you shortly. But before we get to that, we'll give you just a brief summary of what we did last week on Joy Change Speaker Series, where myself and Dr. Mame Abena Mensah Bonsu hosted 6 persons to share their views on the need to amend the Constitution. Just some 3-2 minutes each of those persons who spoke, just to bring your mind back on the issue.
Our institutions against partisan political manipulation, to fight corruption, and to enhance trust through transparency. Intufo and Attorney General reported in the 1980 Ghana Law Report at page 637. So what J. Accident was, speaking for the court at page 647, stated that a written constitution such as ours is not an ordinary act of parliament. It embodies the will of the people. It mirrors his history. He goes on to conclude. It contains within it aspirations and hopes for a better and fuller life. It contains within it their aspirations and hopes for a better and fuller life. I must hasten to add that I am not unaware of the existence of views of other people who think and believe that the Constitution, being a living document capable of growth, coupled with the fact that constitutions are normally skeletal frameworks, it should be left to the province of the courts to provide the ingredients that will ensure its growth through the utilization of the interpretative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The chief proponent of this view appears to me, in my humble view, to be the President of the Republic of Ghana, who has cautioned campaigners for constitutional reforms to hasten slowly. Festina lente, he says. The President did not, however, make haste slowly when he decided to appoint a record number of judges to the apex court of the land, even in the face of an existing caution by the African Peer Review Committee against packing the courts. And I just heard Mensah Bonsu say that, ask a question, can we trust our Supreme Court, our courts? Moreover, the recent reversal of the Supreme Court of the United States of America of the decision in Roe and Wade does not give campaigners like myself comfort. It is my considered view that a political solution to the perceived weakness of the Constitution is the way to go. So there is the need to trigger Chapter 25 of the 1992 Constitution. I therefore vote for constitutional reform. To conclude, my people in Dabong, the Dogombes, have a saying which loosely translates as, the fact that you cannot do all, you cannot accomplish all, should not prevent you, should not stop you from doing some, from accomplishing some. Thus, if a total overhaul as canvassed by
clearly the essential elements which constitute our aspirations from the preamble include blessings of liberty, equal opportunity, prosperity for the people, freedom and justice, property and accountability, universal adult suffrage, and the stability of our great nation. It is evident that after 3 solid decades of operating this document, several of the aspirations have eluded the good people of Ghana. The state of affairs now. Our country is yet to derive the dividends of democratic governance, and I think I heard the other day that the president of Zambia was also saying the same. The conduct of peaceful elections and the successive transfer of power have been used as an indicator of success of our democracy, without evaluating the actual improvements in the lives of the people. And that makes me look at the title of your program today, which says, "If you do democracy, we go chop." So there's without evaluating the improvements in the lives of the people in the area of education for every citizen, access to basic social amenities such as water, electricity, affordable housing, infrastructural development, housing, jobs for the youth, political accountability, reduction in corruption, and economic stability. What we have to show for 30 years of democratic governance is massive levels of youth unemployment, excessive powers of the executive arm of government, as your previous speaker said, Lardy, a grossly compromised parliament, abuse of power, unbridled corruption, waste of Ghana's resources, nepotism, mediocrity, mismanagement of the economy, and the constant failure of leadership.
Much of the growing public frustration and disenchantment with governance in Ghana today come from the shortfalls in practice democracy. Our democratic practice is increasingly exclusive, divisive, and extremist, and is hampering economic progress. Most observers attribute the condition of exclusion, division, and extremism to the winner-takes-all electoral system, which is monopolized by two political parties, the NPP and the NDC. In this duopoly, a party winning elections, even with 1 percentage point, takes complete possession of the state, from the national to the local levels. The politics of exclusion, which is embedded in the winner-takes-all system, is perhaps the key reason for the heightened, unhealthy rivalry between the NDC and the NPP. The rabid partisanship has led to any party in opposition having to simply oppose and discredit the government of the day. It has led to the disgusting habit of claims and counterclaims over who built this road or that school. The unhealthy rivalry has led to the abandonment of projects initiated by preceding governments, irrespective of their relevance and how much has been sunk into it. Above all, it has led to short-sighted approach to development. Meanwhile, political party organization and electoral politics have been highly monetized. They have become a game for the rich and corrupt, as admitted publicly by some failed candidates. Votes of delegates at party primaries are bought, and the highest bidder often wins. At the national level, presidential candidates sell themselves with gifts and phantom promises. Needless to say, the cost of participation and the embedded corruption, even appointment to institutions classified by the Constitution as independent, are to be made by the president, who is a partisan. Yet, we expect these bodies to be neutral. So apart from the so-called independent bodies, the Constitution places no limit on numbers and levels to be appointed. This loophole and the discretion to create ministries and agencies at will enables self-aggrandizing presidents to indulge in creating additional positions.
Our Constitution, PNDC Law 282, has lost the capacity to generate a framework for justice or to secure for us the blessings of equal opportunity and prosperity. Its soul and spirit have been compromised by a generation of greed and decay. For 30 years, we have, with the complicity of the 1992 Constitution, built a society that thrives on exclusion and violence. A republic where soldiers can walk into and brutalize an entire community because one of them lost his young fool. Where our military, with the blessings of our president and his appointees, descend on the community with the heavy machinery our taxes paid for, to slash and maim over 2,000 people in Ashama because one of their own had been killed by thieves. And when they are done, they go to national TV in front of an impotent president and demoralize people. Where those with access and privilege, members of the ruling class, call the military secretly to congratulate them for unleashing their terror and inhumanity on us. And yet our Constitution keeps silent. Speak if you are alive. Protect us if you are not dead. When those charged with giving life to a Constitution can look the other way, as so many of our people hunger and die without any sense of obligation or shame, when Ghanaians are killed at will and randomly with impunity from Ejura to Techiman, when our existence as citizens is only tolerated by a political class that has not yet found a way to enrich themselves by getting rid of us. Where our cry for the freedom and justice our fathers promised us is mocked. How dare you tell me that this is a constitutional democracy? We are living in an era where the pensions of our fathers and the toil of our mothers is at risk because our government will rather borrow to enrich themselves and their cousins and pursue grandiose cathedrals of doom. Where our schools are being deprived of investment and our hospitals are running out of vaccine, where young people have no jobs, all public sector jobs are either reserved for political party foot soldiers, depend on protocol, who you know, and payment of bribe. Yet we pretend to not notice all of this.
I'm going to draw out the lines I see between what you were saying and what Brigitte was saying, for instance, that we talk about the peaceful transfer of power and the number of elections, but not the impact of the Constitution on the lives of citizens. And that is the true measure, really, of any Constitution's achievements. And as one of those who have several times mentioned the age of the Constitution, I should point out that there are those who value that which is old for being old's sake. But when I talk about the age of the Constitution, what I am celebrating is the length of time in which we have not lived under a gun, and what that does for you as a people.
About Article 71, and we are all talking about it. What a crazy train it is that people get fast money at the end of every cycle because they are deemed to have retired and come back to office. Where in the Constitution is the number? Are the numbers dictated? No. The Constitution says there should be a commission that should determine the terms and conditions and emoluments of certain office holders for a specific term of for a specific period, 4 years. What has the political class done? They have deferred it. Although the Constitution effectively demands that it starts when a term starts, they defer it to the end of the term. So that by the time the commission is appointed and does its work, there's very little time for public debate. So it goes to the president to approve of the parliament, and it goes to parliament to approve for the executive, wrap my back. They agree on fat amounts of money, for the most part, as back pay, and then pensions. And so everybody who fits Article 71 place, once the back pay is calculated, makes the back pay. And we, as the people, can't insist that a president who comes to power must immediately set up the committee, for the committee to give the figures, for there to be enough time for the people of Ghana to be able to debate it, and not at the midnight of power. And we can't do something as simple as this. We can't tell this president that set up the committee now to determine now what the emoluments are, instead of, quote unquote, stopping what was prepared for your predecessors, in the hope that when the committee is set up in the next couple of years, times would have changed. It will recommend increases in your salary. That new increased salary will be used to calculate your back pay and your pension, so you go away and join the gravy train. And we can't do this. And we think that simply amending the Constitution will resolve this. Let me move on to the number of Supreme Court judges. I hear it all the time. And I agree. Maybe the framers should have provided a cap. Or maybe they expected us to be sensible and reasonable. That we want to give you a cap because things might change. And we don't want you to be stuck in a situation where you have to amend the Constitution every time that the situation on the Supreme Court changes. And look, we give the U.S. as an example, 9 judges. But the U.S., through their in limine proceedings, determine how many cases the Supreme Court is going to hear anyway. The vast majority of cases don't get heard. And Supreme Court does not have that benefit. In all of its jurisdictions, original, appellate, specialties, there are about 6 of them. In all of them, the Supreme Court must sit and hear the matter. Who has done the math? What's the volume of work? How many pages are these people reading? How many judgments are they producing? What is the work in progress time from filing to decision? How long does it take? Why is it taking 3 years for a simple constitutional challenge to be heard? Is it because we think the judges are simply lazy? Is it because we don't have enough judges? Or is it because they are swamped with work? Nobody is doing the heavy lifting. We just want to make the noise. Provide a cap. So the cap might be too wide or might be too small. But we need to roll our sleeves up and ask, why is this going on, and what can we do? Well, why not? Let's amend the Constitution and provide a cut. Because we think that amending the Constitution is a simple answer to all our problems and a simple refusal to think, roll up our sleeves, and do the heavy lifting. Let me end with this. We want to amend the Constitution. Let's get ready. And I believe in constitutional amendments of Constitution. And the thinly veiled threat of some other change, well, let us cross or blow that bridge if we ever get there. But between now and then, I think that we need to form our own CDC. With the CDC, which is either Committee for the Defense of the Constitution or Constitution Defense Committee, where a number of people in this country will say, let us defend this document that we have put down from these executive tricks and judicial tricks, where they do everything in their power to breach the Constitution. If they make any wrong move, we are either making noise in their ears or we are taking them to court for there to be judicial determination on this issue. Whether we win or not is another thing.
And he's very right that Parliament actually carries a lot of the blame for the things that don't work well in our Constitution. Because no Constitution can provide for everything. And if it did, it would create a robotic people if it was successful in doing so. At some point, there's a meeting between text and people, their choices, their discretion, the things that they would prioritize. Yes, the ordinary rural Ghanaian may not be in a position to hold their parliamentarian accountable, and that is a problem. That's one of the problems that Oliver identifies with our Constitution. And as Bridget was saying, the impact on human lives. But there is a class of Ghanaians who could and should and don't. So when Ace talks about how it took civil society rising up to tell the Attorney General, he's right. Civil society did that. But civil society ought to do that. That is civil society's role. There's nothing particularly impressive about civil society having to do that, because democracy is a three-way pact between the state, its agents, and the people whose power they are exercising. So yes, Parliament is to blame for a lot of our problems, for the practices that don't allow for accountability, for not ensuring things that they've been empowered to do are done.
This is a defining moment in our political history as a country, and we should be quite rightly proud of how far we've come. Our achievements are monumental, and Ghana's reputation all over Africa as a beacon for democracy is very well deserved. We've held 8 democratic elections. And Ghana's reputation all over Africa as a beacon for democracy is very well deserved. We've held 8 democratic elections. Elections have been keenly fought, but the outcomes never preordained. And even though they are intensely fought, the winner is always magnanimous. The opposition always accepts the outcome or uses constitutional means to challenge the outcome, generally speaking. Let me also highlight that our economic performance over the last 30 years under democratic rule is superior to the 30 years prior to democratic rule. So in spite of all of that, all these good things that we have achieved as a constitutional democracy under this 4th Republican Constitution, it is indisputable that we live in a time of restlessness, discontent, with a unanimous clamor for constitutional amendment that will ostensibly solve all our problems. However, let's also make sure that amendments actually cure the ills we want to eradicate as a society. We are all keenly aware of the many problems plaguing us, and we are also aware that many of those problems will not be resolved by constitutional amendment. We have a plethora of laws in this country that we flout with impunity. Ace has just talked about some of them. At every level, at the political level, at every level, ordinary people, we flout laws with impunity. What is to say that a new constitution will be something different? Which constitutional reforms, new laws are needed to ensure that people who are already paid to deliver government services do not extort arbitrary fees before providing those services to citizens? Do we need constitutional reforms before, for instance, we sanitize our airwaves? Currently, we don't vet anything that we show that is aired on TV or radio. We have fed a whole generation of young people a steady diet of movies and telenovelas. We promote immoral and unethical content, undesirable values. We see the results, because what you feed the brain, you will reap. Is what you put in is what you get out.
We want to say a special thank you to Dr. Mame Mensah Bonsu and all our guests, Asan Kuma, Professor Ajimandria, Kathleen Ade, Bridget Jubanuku, Oliver Baka-Vomawo, Honorable Yunusa Fuseni. We thank all of you so much. We will take a break here and return with the business people in the studio telling us why they say the business will suffer and there will be businesses that will collapse because of the 3 new taxes that have been introduced by the government: the Income Tax Amendment Bill, the Excise Duty Amendment Bill, and the Growth and Sustainability Amendment Bill. They say are inimical to businesses, and their passage last Friday has ushered in the imminent collapse of several businesses, among others. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guest in the studio, President of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, Joseph Obeng, President of the Association of Ghana Industries, Dr. Humphrey Ayim Dake. We also are joined by economist Kwame Pianim and Dr. Lloyd George Edu Amwa, Center for Asian Studies, University of Ghana, Legon, and Dr. Theo Echampong, political risk analyst. We are asking what can be done so that these policies do not end up rather collapsing the economy further than what the economy has suffered. So, good morning. Thank you all very much for making time to join us here to do the Lord's work. Now, I'm going to ask Kwame Pianim and our other guests to hold on for us. I want to listen to the leaders of the business groups who have been speaking about how businesses are going to suffer because of these 3 bills, and then we'll bring you on to digest what it is that their concerns are. So you say that the passage of these 3 new bills, the Income Tax Amendment Bill, the Excise Duty Amendment Bill, and the Growth and Sustainability Amendment Bill, are inimical to businesses, and their passage has ushered in the imminent collapse of several businesses. How do you explain that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope everybody understands this point, that overtaxation impedes on progress of businesses. It's as simple as that. This government realizes that, and that's why in 2017, when they assumed power, they removed what is called the nuisance taxes. And now these nuisance taxes are creeping back in full and other forms. And now it is so much bringing a huge burden on businesses to the extent of collapse. And that's why we are saying that we cannot take it any longer. We cannot bear it any longer. Normally, if a new tax is being introduced, we have stakeholders engagement so that we all evaluate the tax that is coming, if it will destroy businesses or otherwise. The inputs that businesses will do is very important and significant. We never did something, and these bills are being introduced again, which is going to destroy business. In fact, these taxes are counterproductive, even against the government's own quest of industrialization. The Growth and Sustainability levy is going to make us pay multiplicity of taxes, which is not acceptable. Because if communication industries, the insurance industries, the banking industry, the shipping lines, and what have you, are going to pay 5% on their gross, it means that they are going to treat it as an expenditure and pass it on to businesses that apply their services. And that also, we have to contend with 2.5 on our gross also. And so when that happens, it means that we are completely out. Already, the business that we do not do it in isolation. We are doing it in competition with the neighboring countries, with the continental free trade area. We are completely irrelevant and we are out of it because the cost of doing business is extremely very high. Even among the cross-border trading activities that we do along the West Africa sub-region, we are also losing out. Even to Togo, that's why you hear so many people going to Togo to buy goods every now and then. Only last 10 days or so, Gapoha called us, GPHA, called us into a meeting and saying that the Tama port is almost empty and that we should come and brainstorm why and how we can restore confidence in the port again. He said it's because people are frustrated with the cost of doing business in the port. And the port is not also working in isolation. They are into competition with left Cote d'Ivoire and the right Togo. And so if your cost of doing business is high, then you see that people are going to that side. And then also excess taxation also leads to smuggling and all that. So it means that people then do not come through the mainstream port and then go through other areas. Let's talk about inflation. The inflation that we are experiencing here now in Ghana is as a result of accumulation of cost. And it's too much a burden for the consuming public as well as the trading community, because trading thrives on turnover. And that if your turnover is curtailed, but because the consuming public's the purchasing power has been lessened because of the inflation that we have, are unable to buy the volumes that they used to buy. It means that we are unable to service our loans because your turnover is curtailed. So if you look at all these things, then we're surprised. That's why we show our disapproval to Parliament for passing this law, because this is a law or bill that was coming that all trade associations, trade organizations have come and protested. That if you do this, we are already overburdened. The taxes that have been increased since 2021, the COVID pandemic, the effects on businesses were more than anything else. And that's even with the COVID pandemic, we were made to pay a tax on the COVID itself. What is more nuisance than this? There's no precedent anywhere in the world that the businesses were made to pay.
The understanding is that we are not in normal times. So you can't expect things to be in the period when taxes were being removed for being nuisance taxes. The growth and sustainability levy, as we understand, is 5% of profit before tax, correct? And those who are affected are the banks, the non-bank institutions, insurance companies, the telcos, breweries, inspection companies, bulk oil distributors, and the OMCs. And then you have 1% gross. That's what you were talking about. 1% gross production. That's for the mining companies and upstream oil and gas companies. And then you have 2.5% of profit before tax. That is supposed to be what affects everybody else.
Like us.
Right. And this is expected. The purpose is to generate as much as 4 billion, as we understand, to cushion the economy in this dire circumstance.
So is there no other alternative to this? Because the IMF itself does not seek the destruction of businesses. The intention of IMF to salvage us from our problem. And then the efforts of IMF to relieve us from this problem will come to naught, will amount to nothing when at the end of the day businesses are destroyed. And that's why we do not adopt this, we disapprove on this tax. Because we could have adopted alternatives. And that's why we were calling for stakeholder engagement so that we also will build consensus and then we arrive at any necessary alternative that could save the nation and also save the generality of businesses at that. And we are not asking nothing. Because IMF did not impose this type of taxes on us. It is our own bargain. And that's why if we are sat down, we could have preferred even better alternative for us to send it to IMF rather than this one that impedes against growth itself. Already, when taxes are taken from the left, the interest rate is also taken from the right. You are borrowing at the rate of 40+%. And then all these taxes are piled up on you. VAT used to be 3%. And now we are migrating into the standard rate, which will accumulate to about 22%. All other taxes. So it's not that we are not paying these taxes. Let me tell you, businesses have not performed badly. For the past couple of years, Ghana Revenue Authority have been exceeding its revenue target. And so if they have been exceeding their revenue target and government is still in want, then government have to put its expenditure in check. Because we are doing our best. Or if government still seek from us, then we have to expand the tax net because just a few of us are paying these taxes and is breaking the backs of businesses. Ghana Revenue Authority itself have said that about 13 million Ghanaians have the capacity to pay taxes, but only about 5 million is captured into the tax net. So do we have to push all this problem at the back of these few people that is paying? That's why I say we could adopt prudent and pragmatic and efficient tax collecting mechanism that will rope in a lot more people into the tax net, that will ensure compliance. Because the taxes that we are paying is already enough. If we have compliance, and then most people, because even the VAT that we pay in this country, about only 20% are charging the VAT, and about less than 10% of the generality of Ghanaians are collecting VAT invoices. If you want, you are a journalist, go run and ask any in the street who have a VAT invoice. They don't have. And then we use VAT also to develop the country. So it's about ensuring efficiency, adopting prudent and pragmatic measures to enrope in a lot more to pay these taxes, plugging the loopholes. There are a lot of loopholes in the warehousing system, in the free zone system. We have to, and then the tax exemption policy, where there are huge abuses there. He said that if you're able to do it well and even cancel the tax exemption policy, only to you to apply when it is necessary, we can be saving about 2 billion only there, and then plugging the loophole. So if we sit down with government and then we all we all build consensus, at the end of the day, we can bring even a much better alternative that may not necessarily kill the local industries, as we are saying.
You will need to demonstrate practically beyond the figures and the global talk how exactly these 3 tax introductions and amendments will impact on your business. You have said, first of all, that you will be forced to also ensure that whatever you have to pay, it is the consumer that will pay. And already we can't afford. So that means a lot of trouble. But I want you to, help us here. as we understand, the tax revenue value in 6 years is a total of about 300 billion Ghana cedis that the government has raked in. In 2017, 33.6 billion. In 2018, almost 40 billion. In 2019, 45.6 billion. In 2020, 47.4 billion. In 2021, 57 billion. And then in 2022, we had 75 billion. So the problem is not that of lack of revenue, but we are not in normal times. Should you be complaining that the government is increasing the burden on businesses and the people?
Yes, we should be complaining. Samson, thank you for the opportunity. First and foremost, AGI recognizes the headwinds, significant ones, of course, both international and domestic, affecting the Ghanaian economy. And we also appreciate the concern of government to secure an IMF bailout to bring about stability and confidence in our economy, respectively to the macro space that we all yearn to see, so that we can get effective planning. And as you've asked the question, what is the major concern of industry? Our major concern has been that thou shalt not sacrifice the growth of industry at the expense of the IMF agenda, which is clearly an objective of government. And considering the state of affairs, it is the priority of government. But beyond securing this, if thou secures it through sacrificing the growth, there are consequences. So in our conversation and your prayer to government, we sought to demonstrate the consequences of this. And that leads to the subject matter of the taxes collected over the period, that it isn't a matter of the revenue, but the budget demonstrates that there's always a deficit position of government, irrespective of the revenue. So getting revenue is one arm of it. The second is the expenditure. So where the expenditure and the revenue has a gap, which is then established by deficit, which is always demonstrated in the budget, it does, even the government will have a target through its various revenue angles. The question is this sufficient to meet its expenditure target? And once that is not the case, then government still needs more revenue. And you could see the infrastructural development requires and the needs. And these needs are all captured under a least developing economy. The characteristics of a least developed economy are unique, and therefore the demands are excessive. When you see the urban drift, I once upon a time watched the Miracle Schools. There was a documentary you did, and the schools, some had chairs, some did not, and the question became a very contentious issue. It has to do with unavailability or insufficient infrastructure in the context of a least developing economy. The urban drift, and then the rural drift, and the population boom, all those characteristics affects the context of a developing economy. And therefore, you will not at any point in time have enough money or enough revenue to satisfy all. It becomes a subject matter of priority. How do you prioritize? Same then comes to the context of what we discussed, that as we seek to secure the IMF deal, we're still waiting for the terms of the deal because of the external factors. That will also shape the trajectory of governance and the economic model we seek to build. So in this set context, AGI's concern is that if you seek to sacrifice growth using the excise duties, it makes industry uncompetitive. It leads to low growth, it leads to unemployment, it leads to informality of the economy. It leads to what? Low taxation. It opens the door for more importation. It puts more pressure on the cedi. It distorts the economic formula that you seek to do what we call the structural transformation. The structural transformation will elude you by virtue of these dynamics. How do you correct it? So our biggest concern is that if growth it's short change. But experts will say stagflation will come in. What are these consequences into the future? I suggest and I'll profess that if we go with the structure as has been tabled and as has been approved, that will automatically anchor the 18th IMF deal into the future. Because the structures as has been laid out will not give us the room to be export-oriented. The export orientation that we seek to push to export and get more revenue in terms of dollars to balance our deficit will not be the case. So we're looking at this and we are looking at the consequences of what is being rolled out for the sake of IMF. I believe in our conversation and proposition to government is, yes, my brother here has mentioned a number of issues, deepen the compliance level. The EVAT that government has introduced, and currently government is putting in place framework to roll out about 600 companies. That will be significant, and when they did the pilot, it is evident how revenue jumped. So I believe that is one way of deepening compliance. Secondly, he mentioned the exemption bill that has been repealed and then being recalibrated. We know there are implementation challenges. Some SOEs, some institutions are having difficulties through the 6-month exemption policies and the procedures. That will be perfected. That we believe will be another vehicle to rake in significant revenue. And then I've mentioned the EVAT, I mentioned the exemption, and recently the utility companies have done a lot of adjustment in their pricing. That is also affecting the same companies that are producing the beverages, and in that space, most of them will be affected by the excise duty. We should realize that IMF being Agenda 1, inflation is Agenda 2 to government. So right after that, government will seek to reduce the inflationary target. But with the taxes rolled out, that will also trigger inflation. So how do you seek to reduce Agenda 2, which is the inflationary basket? And in the inflationary basket, food and non-food items form one of the significant drivers, including fuels, including other ones that the government statisticians have stated. So our biggest concern is if we roll out this policy as it is, the future will be challenging. And then the same companies that you seek to rake in this 4 billion out of will be challenged that as we are frustrated, same will be that government might not meet its intended agenda of raking in the 4 billion. So yes, the revenue basket is being raked in per government's target with its revenue or handles. But what is the expenditure basket as a least development economy? We have several challenges to attain. So I associate myself on a number of issues with our being, and we believe we can engage government, and as we're giving alternatives, that those will be routes that we believe will not be destructive. As much as the macroeconomic indicators as it is now is pervasive and then very intrusive, like the inflationary basket that is distorting our operations and cost of doing business. By virtue of these taxes, especially the excise duty, we do not conform even to the West African Economic Bloc. The West African Economic Bloc excise duty rate is between 1 to 10%. And as we roll ours between 20 to 50, we are out of line. And therefore, it opens the borders, and there'll be a lot of imports. Obin will be excited about that, but that will put a lot of pressure on the exchange rate. And as that does, the ramifications and the consequences will be dire for our country.
Kweku Ntrubwesiaku has a way, of summarizing things and sharing his views on them in a very, nice way. And he said that the AGI doesn't get it. At this point, every government policy has just one objective: to secure an IMF program to sustain the government through the next election cycle, hoping to hoodwink Ghanaians to give them another term. The government is not thinking beyond securing an IMF program. Nothing else rings a bell in their ears anymore. Just the same way they didn't listen to sound advice almost 2 years prior to having to swallow their pride and dash to the IMF with Usain Bolt's speed. Then he explains the point. The ones they kill off local production on the trajectory AGI is warning about, and making us import dependent. The cedi will need annual injection of foreign currency to avoid depreciation, which is what they were doing before, borrowing from the international capital markets to provide artificial strength to the currency. They would never have gone to the IMF except for being shut out of the capital markets, which caused the pack to crumble. Once we exit the program, they can go back to their old ways and IMF can't say jack. They are not thinking beyond IMF. Otherwise, they will be more concerned about winning us off imports, not the other way around. As long as we are import dependent, we will forever remain in this vicious cycle. Now, my question to my panelists who are joining us via Zoom and via phone. So, Mr. Kwampieni, my question is, government clearly knows better. It must be aware of the dire consequences and fears expressed by the business leaders. It certainly won't plan to plunge the already battered economy into more trouble, correct?
I guess that if you are a government and you think that you know better than your citizens, then you are in trouble. You do not. And this is why I'm surprised hearing from the AGI that there was no stakeholder consultation on these taxes. If you take the growth and sustainability, fiscal sustainability levy that the government is planning on bringing on, it is going to be paid into the consolidated fund. And it's for 3 years. You know, it seems as if it's just another lie or fit to hoodwinkle the Ghanaians. You know, if I would have applauded this tax, if the government is saying, look, because of the past recklessness that we've been involved in, our tax revenue is not able to cover interest rate payments, salaries and wages and so forth and services. And therefore, we are putting aside a certain amount, no matter how small, 4 billion, take it as $400 million, that will be used for growth, which means it was going to be set aside for, let's say, transforming agriculture, for agro-processing, for minimizing importation of foodstuff and so forth. This is the beginning. But it doesn't seem to be true. That's what they want to do. Why 3 years? After 3 years, then they would have attained Singapore status, so we don't need the money anymore. If the argument is that we need to raise our tax revenue to a certain level, comparable with other countries, so that we get the IMF program, fine. Let's tell the Ghanaians that's what we are trying to do. Then let's go back and say, who are the people who are contributing to tax revenue? The numbers we give are not verified. Cocoa farmers pay about 30% of their turnover as tax. They are paid at best 70%, 60%, 65% of the FOB price of cocoa. The assumption is that Cocoa Board will take 5%, 10 percentage points of that for the input that they supply to them. The rest of the money is to be given to the Ghana government. How many cocoa farmers are there? Are they part of the people who are paying rent? They are not, obviously, because government has set up Cocoa Board as a cost center. They don't contribute cocoa farmers' revenue to the airport. Cocoa Board has now overborrowed for what I do not understand. They are bankrupt now. And government says, don't worry, we've brought the Cocoa Board debt to the government, to the public debt, That's what we are trying to say. The argument made by the AGI is that the domestic debt exchange is taking a lot of money from the banks. Their liquidity, the ability is going to go down. How are they going to make the profit for us to be able to take that money from them? And if this levy is based on your profit before tax, why didn't we just add it to the existing tax so that businesses are not being asked to file other administration of this levy? It's difficult time. Businesses are difficult surviving. You are adding additional administrative burden onto them. It doesn't. We should not do that. The revenues that we are collecting, you bring a lot of uncertainties when you see oil, gas, and so forth. You know, this government has been in power for 6 years almost. Not one plan of development has been approved for the oil sector. And you are adding an additional uncertainty, whether new ones coming in are going to be subject, or even the existing ones who have signed agreements with us are going to be subject to this new levy. My suggestion is that, yes, we need to do certain things to get an IMF coverage, but we should not sacrifice growth. We want to bring our debt level to a certain percentage of GDP. The domestic debt exchange, as structured now, declining. Why are we looking only at 3 years when Kenoforiate is no longer in power, when Anekukwado is no longer in power? Is that the extent of the life of this country? We have to take our time and look. How are we going to survive? Revenue is not a problem. We didn't have oil revenue. We're surviving. We have oil. We're having problems. The oil of it to be used to support the budget. All this, are these also added to the tax revenue, or we don't add them to the tax revenue? So let's sit down quietly and decide. Where are we? Where do we want to be? And how do we empower our businesses? I'm told the African Continental Free Trade Area, just because the head office is in Ghana, doesn't mean that we are going to benefit. Rwanda, Kenya are busy building ports, airports, which will stock a lot of goods. We just become a captured importer of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We are not going to benefit. The free zones will go to Côte d'Ivoire and go to Togo. We may not benefit, but the time has come for us to sit down. Don't let's just look at the IMF program, where to get the $3 billion to support it. What about cutting expenditures? So let us look at this economy beyond Kenoforiate and Anekukwado. Look at the economy 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. That's my advice. The way we are going is not the right. Normally, before you come out with taxes, you come out with the idea. You float it, then there's a green paper, people discuss it, people give the ideas, then the government says, I've heard you. This is my white paper.
Right.
We don't.
What will be your suggestion further? What should be done in regard to these bills that have already been passed? Because that's their concern. And like you also share in their concern, perhaps they shouldn't have been passed at all. Now they have been passed. What should happen? The AGI is listing a number of challenges that is confronting industries. It is talking about electricity tariffs that have shot up significantly. on 2 occasions, totaling a whopping 56.5% within less than 6 months. They say that the beverages sector cannot absorb water tariff increment over 300%. You know, and all of these, they say, are contrary to government's ambitious, you know, revenue projection, which largely hinges on the performance of industry. So they foresee a contraction in manufacturing and other related business activities. What should be done? These have already been passed.
His Excellency President Adudam Kwekufuadu should refuse to sign these bills. Obviously, Parliament did not ask the right questions. I mean, this Parliament is going to go down in history as one of the worst parliaments we've ever had. They don't ask questions. They pass all the bills for borrowing money that led us into this problem. This government, by procurement, interested in just the more projects we have, the better for people to make money. Cocoa board projects, and they are not even wondering about how bankrupt they put the organization in. They are thinking about building a new headquarters. It doesn't make sense. We have to say, look, enough is enough. The president should not sign these bills. The assumption was that when the Minister of Finance has done its work, obviously they have to have an economic model which says after the domestic debt exchange, what is the economy looking like? What is it going to be? Are we going to have depression, low economic growth for the next 3-5 years? And if so, what is going to happen to government revenue? Nobody seems to be looking at that. And then it goes to Parliament. We expect parliamentarians to consult their people, think about it, and ask questions. They obviously don't. They just pass them. So our last hope is for the president to say, thank you, Parliament, I will not sign this bill because it's not good. Look at the excise taxes. The ad valorem, it says 2 US cents. The government tells us, don't dollarize the economy. They are dollarizing it. Can you imagine if the city is unstable? Every week, manufacturers will have to adjust their prices because the city dollar rate has changed. And therefore, your excise, which is based not on cedi, but in dollars, will also change. Does it make sense? We are building inflation into this system. I think that it's not well thought of. The president should not sign it. Parliament should think again. And we should tell the IMF, look, our tax revenue is not comparable with other countries. There are a whole lot of revenues that are not there. You know, part of the revenue was supposed to be set aside for Ghana Education Trust Fund to build infrastructure so that in case nothing is happening, at least some infrastructures are being built in the schools. What did we do? We went and said that, borrowed against it. Now that is part of the debt that is going to be pushed, that is being restructured. Electricity, levies, we're paying. And that is also part. The electricity we didn't consume, the electricity the government frivolously does to people, and the water they dash to people during the COVID. $3 billion came in. Why didn't you use part of that to cover it? Instead of saying, oh, the government is going to give free water, free electricity. And then that is also part of the debt that we are restructuring now. Look, we should be straightforward with the people of Ghana. We should be transparent. We should not tell a lie. This levy has nothing to do with growth. It has nothing to do with fiscal sustainability. It's a lie.
Before you take leave of us, we are going to China begging, hoping that they may forgive us of the 1.7 billion United States dollars that we owe them. We have a Eurobond, debt of $13 billion dollars. We owe our multilateral, partners $8 billion. The Paris Club countries 1.9 billion. And then with some other countries, we have 3.2 billion. That's in excess of 20, how much billion that we owe in United States dollars. So we are in extraordinary times. We are not in normal times. Something must be done, and it will not be the usual approach.
My friend, you are talking about extraordinary times. We walked into these times with our eyes open. Do we have floods? Have we have hurricanes in Ghana? Did we have Ebola? What did we have? We had a Minister for Finance who borrowed, and Parliament that supported him to borrow. Borrowed. We are 66 years old as an independent country. We have now somebody from the U.S. Treasury sitting in the Ministry of Finance to hold Ken Ofori-Atta's hand. Ken told me once, we went to school with these same white boys. We are just as good as them. Now he has somebody sitting there holding his hand, giving him tutorials in what? And we have somebody being paid by a Swiss franc sitting in Bank of Ghana. Our governor was out giving advice to other countries. We should be ashamed of ourselves, 66 years old. And we are being recolonized. Why can't the Americans help us by appointing a governor general to come and govern for us? And appoint 5 lawyers so that we can send home the 275 parliamentarians. And those 5 lawyers will make our bills for us. Look, we are matured enough. We should not run to Daddy and say, there is no Father Christmas. Let us make haste slowly, as the Romans used to say. Let's sit down now and say, how do we cut our coat according to our cloth so that every 4 years we don't run to the IMF? Projects. Why projects? Every project in Ghana costs double the price. Why? Because of incompetence and corruption. The German ambassador was telling us, show us we are going to help you, but show us that you are doing something. Cut some expenditures. Have we cut any? We have more ministers than the US, UK, Germany. Who is there? Where is Father Christmas? As far as I'm concerned, nobody should give us any debt forgiveness. They should structure it, we should pay. So next time somebody is borrowing like there's no tomorrow, we'll tell them, stop borrowing because you have to pay. I was hoping that this growth and sustainability levy was going to set aside some money that will create income, a stream of income, so that revenues are being created. We are now having used manufacturing companies. Now you want to put a levy, SI duty, on the juices. After you've clubbed people and somebody dies, they go to the funeral. You know, when they give you a Fanta, when you go to a funeral, you pay a donation equivalent to that. Now you are going to put levies on Fanta and Coca-Cola, just like on spirits and so forth. And then on these cigarettes, when somebody is changing from cigarettes, you use these electronic devices. You say you are going to put a levy or SIG also on those ones. Why? You don't want people to transition. And the monies we are collecting, are you going to put it aside to cure cancer, or it goes into the consolidated fund for you to spend on your project? Look, the government should say that the next 2 years, they are not going to make any money on any project. We are all in this together.
Okay.
They should also make sacrifices, like Ghanaians are making sacrifices.
All right. Thank you so very much. Mr. Kwame is an economist, and you just heard him loud and clear. He's been very consistent about the need to do the things that we can do locally and sensibly to reduce the burden, stop the spending that is not necessary as well. Now, I'm bringing into Dr. Theo Champong in here very briefly, but before I bring him in, I want you to take a listen to this, that our situation is not one that we're talking about locally, and that among our peers internationally, we have become the butt of jokes about the way we are managing our economy. Dr. Donald Kaberuka, a former president of the African Development Bank Group, cited Ghana, he didn't want to mention the name Ghana, as an example of a promising economy that is now failing and resorting to the IMF for rescue. He was speaking at a conference of President Paul Kagame's Liberation Party, the Rwandan Patriotic Front in Kigali, as it celebrated its 35th anniversary. And Evans Spencer has been asking, who has been in, Rwanda, has been asking Ghana if we could take some lessons from their economic management module, not their democracy, quote-unquote democracy or political system. If you hear anybody tell you that story that Evans is saying we should have a dictator, they are telling a lie. He doesn't say any of that, close to that in his report. Let's listen to Dr. Donald Kaberuku.
That, for example, a country in West Africa, please no names, which was the first one to go to the IMF and begin general economic reforms, is back to the IMF today. Please, no names. Why? A combination of domestic indiscipline, macroeconomic indiscipline, and these external shocks. So as a result, they have lost what I call political space, fiscal space, policy space. The decisions they're now implementing are not their decisions. Why? Because during the days when things were very good, they did all the wrong things. They ticked all the wrong boxes. Massive borrowing, for example, massive spending, huge levels of the deficit, without building the resilience for when the days will be difficult. I can think now of about 14 countries in Africa who are in that phase. So the first thing I think our message we're passing here is that restoring that degree of economic independence begins by economic discipline.
Right. Dr. Theo Champong, yes, briefly, what will be your comment or position on this? The business leaders are unanimous. They are speaking as never before in this country, saying what you are doing, you're going to muzzle, you're going to kill businesses even further.
Good morning. I understand where the business leaders are coming from, particularly given the environment that we find ourselves in with high inflation, the cost of borrowing up, and both Humphrey and the Gutta president have been at length to explain these issues. And of course, other people have also raised these concerns. But the point really also for me is that we need to make some trade-offs, right? So the short-term trade-offs, which is about increasing our revenue base, and particularly the government wanting to increase their tax to GDP from 13 to about 18% in the next couple of years. And then the long-term trade-offs about the overall growth of the economy and the ability to create jobs. That's the context within which I analyze these issues from. So if we take the three bills specifically, there are some of them that I actually support, and then others that I don't. And I'll explain that briefly in a moment. So the exercise duty bill and the details underpinning the bill, if you actually read the details, a number of the products that the taxes are going up is to do with things like spirits, with wines, with malt drinks, and with sweetened beverages and e-cigarettes and things like that. And we do know that these actually are having quite serious health consequences on the general population. So from a sort of health policy point of view, I support the attempt to actually raise the exercise duties on a number of these, line items for the malt drinks, the wines, and the spirits. Call it like a sugar tax in a sense, right? And then the same thing with the tobacco. Same argument could be made for the increment or the adjustment in some of the income taxes. But where I disagree with the government really is on the growth and the sustainability levy. Mr. Kwame Fianim talked about the excessive taxation. Interestingly, this levy, and it's important that our viewers understand this, this is actually not new. It is a metamorphosis of the fiscal stabilization levy that we've had over the years. So you can go all the way back to 2001 when we passed the National Reconstruction Levy, right? And at that time, it was a similar thing where some companies, with the exception of, I think it was banks and community, rural and community banks, that had an exemption from that levy, and they were paying an amount which worked all the way through from 2001 to 2006. And then we made an amendment to it and even collected more, but this time around included or expanded the scope to include things like insurance companies, breweries, banks, inspection and evaluation companies, and you name it. Then between 2010 to 2019, we made further adjustments or amendments to this National Reconstruction Levy, which became a National Fiscal Stabilization Levy in 2009. And then subsequently in 2023 now, we are proposing to change a bit of the name from this fiscal stabilization into growth and sustainability levy. So my point is that this levy has always been on our books in one shape or form over the last 22 years. The issue is that the import of the levy or the act is always meant to be temporary, but typically what is meant to be temporary now becomes permanent. So even this 2023 to 2025 timeline that the government is talking about for this new growth sustainability levy, I doubt that at the end of 2025, it will be off the books. It's very much going to be tweaked and it's still going to stay on our books. The details of the growth and sustainability levy and what the government wants to collect, I see some implementation challenges there, right? So they've categorized the companies into three bands. Group A or Category A, which includes the banks, the non-banks, the insurance companies, the people that already were paying the fiscal stabilization levy, the earlier one. Then there's two new additions, which is the inclusion of the mining and then the oil and gas companies. And for them, they're meant to pay 1% of their gross production. And there's a third category of 2.5% of profit before tax on any other entity or company that does not fall in the first two categories. So you see here that the scope is being widened to capture pretty much every company within the economy. But the issue is the issue of the excessive taxation, and specifically for the mining and the upstream companies, I struggle to see how the government is actually going to ask them to pay this tax because they have existing agreements, and within those agreements, you have these fiscal stabilization provisions that says that the government cannot go back and change or even impose future tax terms that would make the cost of doing business for them quite difficult. So most likely we see some of them, actually resorting to arbitration and triggering those clauses within their respective contract. Because the 1% tax that the government is charging on these extractive companies, in very simple terms, and again, for the purposes of our listeners, it is working like a royalty, right? Because these are not allowed to be deducted against their future corporate income taxes. So they would very much fight this, I think, tooth and nail. So in essence, what I see really is that the 4 billion target that the government has put together to raise from these 3 new tax handles, most likely it may not meet that 4 billion target. It would raise some money, definitely, but that 4 billion target may become a bit challenging to meet. But the short-term priority for the government really is to raise new or more revenue. There are other things that we can discuss around the expenditure and you name it. But this is where really the sort of policy drive is.
All right. Finally, what do you say to, what would be a comment on what Kwame Pieni has just told us? And he ends by clearly being unequivocal that the president should not even assent to this. And you know, there's a man of God who said to me that this is like what happened in the Bible. You know, remember the rebellion against Rehoboam? He told the people that my father's finger is thicker than, you know, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Whereas my father, you know, burdened you with a heavy yoke, he said, I will add to your yoke. Whereas my father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions. Is that what is going on? And the system, the refrain we hear is that reduce, you know, your own expenditure. Cut your coat according to your cloth. But that is not going on.
Yeah, look, the yoke is heavy. We have been burdened for a very long time, and it continues to be the case. I realistically don't see the president not signing onto this bill. We've got to be real here. I think there's an avenue for the president to maybe
they actually brought into parliament a sick man so that he could vote, because the minority were determined to vote against it.
It shows how dire the situation is in terms of meeting these benchmarks to get the IMF program going. What I think can be done, right, is some tweaks or an amendment to the bill, particularly the growth and sustainability bill. So, for example, it should be possible for the companies to reclaim these taxes back for the purposes of corporate income taxation, right? That would reduce or lessen the burden in a sense, but also improve the overall business environment. But the idea of actually scrapping it, given our history and what I've shown you, that this law or bill has been in some shape or form on our books for the last 22 years. I don't think it's going to be scrapped, but there's an avenue to tweak some component of it to ensure that you can, one, meet the target, but you can also get the compliance or the enforcement that you need from it.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Theo Echampong is a political risk analyst, very, very familiar with particularly the oil and gas industry, and has authored a book in that regard. Now, I am going to bring in Dr. Lloyd Amoah to help us gauge the situation with respect to seeking to get some reprieve by approaching China. And you know that he is a foremost expert when it comes to the matter of China and business, Ghana-China or Africa-China business relations. We have 1.7 billion US dollars that we owe to China that we are hoping will give us some reprieve. And we have gone trying to beg. We are being told that at one point we are told things appear to be moving on smoothly. At another point we are being told things are not moving as expected, because the projections that we had, including what the president expected will happen, has not happened. So, for example, listen to the president when he was bold, telling us when we are clinching a deal with the IMF.
Assistance to repair in the short term our public finances and restore our balance of payments, whilst we continue to work on the medium to long-term structural changes that are at the heart of our goal of constructing a resilient, robust Ghanaian economy and building a Ghana beyond aid. Reaching an agreement with the board of the fund, which we hope to do very soon, will set the stage for the strong recovery of Ghana's economy. We've gone to the international.
The economic situation of Ghana worries all of us, and the question of debt it is treated by Club of Paris, but not only, also from a common framework. I think the discussion with China and the role of China, it will be very, very important. So that's why I spoke to you about the importance of the common framework. But of course, we totally support, and we will be beside you for the action that will have to be undertaken by the IMF and also the World Bank, because the country needs to regain the economic stability.
Right, so here, that's the president you heard earlier, and then France seeking to, put in a word for us, is it? And as we understand, Beijing is the single largest holder of Ghanaian debts. With such a huge debt portfolio to China, it is impossible to restructure Ghana's external debt stock without China at the negotiation table. So you have followed that Ghana has been appealing to various nations to try and put in a word for us in China. And as we understand, even the World Bank is trying to do a bit of that for us, having actually made a statement and suggested to China that they have to be quick about this for Ghana. Dr. Lloyd Amoah, thank you so very much for making time to join us here on Newsfile. From your reading, how is this going for us? And how do we secure, China's blessing going forward? And I can imagine that the Paris Club and the rest of them, they will be a bit hesitant in how they deal with us. Everybody wants to see who is going to do what for Ghana at what time.
Well, thank you very much, Samson, for having me on. The line has been breaking a bit, but I hope you can hear me.
Very clearly.
Okay, fantastic. This essentially is a game of chess, not checkers. And Ghana essentially has been roped into the complex concourses of international geopolitics and geoeconomics. And essentially, we are facing, obviously, a debt problem. And this debt problem is tied to time. And so, in a sense, we are in a rush trying to meet deadlines involving the International Monetary Fund so that we get a problem, we get a program. My reading of the China scenario is in a bit of a bind. The Chinese just recently came off a massive meeting of the parliament, if you like, and key policy decisions were taken. Now, when you look at these decisions, you will see that China is trying to deal with its own internal issues, and is therefore seized by them. For example, if you look at the Chinese economy, the real estate side is presenting some problems to them. People have taken loans and all of that, and getting those loans back has become important for Chinese economists and those who run their finance side. Again, the issue of technology. As we all know, Huawei has the lead when it comes to 5G, fifth generation, telephony and all of that. And China is increasingly trying to move up and strengthen its technological muscle. But this is essentially being hampered by questions of microchips, and getting access to high performing microchips, which China has tended to depend on its supplies from Europe and especially America, Taiwan, and the rest of them. It doesn't have a foundry, or foundries to build the kind of especially high-end chips, especially the memory chips that it needs to more or less continue to deepen its technological capacity. So these are things that China is deeply worried about and is thinking about. At the level of international relations, the Taiwan question is niggling Chinese strategies. Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan recently. The Taiwan president now essentially made a stopover in the U.S. and met the third highest ranking personality in the American government. So all of these questions has China wanting to deal with this problem so that it would have a clear sense of where it is headed, strengthen its economy, allow it to become the kind of rival to the U.S., as it were. And here comes this little country, Ghana, that is not, in a sense, handling its economic questions the way it should. We owe China close to $2 billion US, and we want the Chinese to, in a sense, help us restructure that. But we have to look at that in terms of China and its economy and its interests and all of that. The Chinese have been supporting us over the last 60 odd years. They have written off some of our debts during the Kufuor era, for example. They have made a lot of investments in China at the level of ODA, official development assistance, and all of that. Now, when you look at West Africa, Ghana ranks amongst the first three. If you look at the long durée, if you look at the data, going back 1958 to say 2014, Ghana ranks amongst the leading countries, first three, that the Chinese have supported in terms of projects, construction, and the rest of them. So I think that the Chinese will be facing a little bit of some fatigue with this country that it has tried to support. And yet it doesn't seem that this country is turning the corner and standing on its own 2 feet. We must not forget that historically, China, vast territory, more population, more complicated geopolitical, geoeconomic reality. Before, the Chinese had to, for example, fall on the Japanese. They are sworn enemies historically to try and rebuild the Chinese economy. The Chinese had to fall on the World Bank, going in for loans and all of that. What was the record? The Chinese paid on time every loan that they took from the World Bank, and the literature is there. So why is it that a resource-endowed country, a particularly well-educated, population for this country, a country with historically very important in Africa, is still not able to get its act together? And I think this is a big problem that would weigh in the moves that the Chinese will make on the chessboard, and further complicates the Ghanaian case. And as we have seen, it's obvious that we are not getting the right sound bites. We are not getting the right feedback from the trip that the finance minister had. I mean, when you look at the key guys that we need to talk to, for example, Li Qiang, who is in a sense like Jirongji, he's now the economic czar. This was the guy who was doing a lot of work when the reform and opening up period took place from 1978 upwards. He became governor of Zhejiang on the eastern side of China. You know, he worked in Shanghai and all of that. These are hard-nosed guys who really saw China roll up its sleeves, go in there and engage the world. Special economic zones, bring in FDI, modulate these FDIs, direct them to proper areas that will benefit China and all of that. And here we are with a China that has risen and moved a chunk of its people, over 800 million by the data, out of poverty. Why is it that Ghana, you know, I mean, since 1983, we've been running this neoliberal capitalist economy consistently. Why haven't we been able to turn the corner? And we go in for loans. We went into the what I call the casino, mode. We were running essentially a casino economy, borrowing from the capital markets. And of course, you want to borrow, but you need to have some kind of strategic orientation in terms of what you want to do with that, because you have to pay the loan anyway, or the loans anyway. And then we get, hit by, events in the international political economy, and we seem to be teetering on the brink of collapse. So it's a difficult situation for Ghana vis-a-vis the Chinese. Their own history, where they came from, where they are, dictates to them that the Ghanaian case has become pathological.
All right. Dr. Lloyd Amwa. Hello, Dr. Lloyd Amwa.
Yeah.
Right. So, seeing that we have had the IMF chief, Kristalina Georgieva, tell, China's top economic official, that is Li Qiang, that they need to accelerate their work to reach debt restructuring agreements for countries like Zambia, Ghana, and Ethiopia. Do you think this will be accelerated in the manner that they expect?
Well, that's a tough question. The Chinese will have to make their own calculations in terms of their finances and how the Ghanaian aspect feeds into it. The idea that somehow or other, that because of our strain with the IMF and the fact that it's bound to time, the Chinese should therefore run for us, is in a sense, in many ways, a bit far-fetched, if not naive.
You have the United States and other Western countries that have faulted China for causing delays in setting up restructuring agreements for heavily indebted countries, that have asked for help under the common framework set up by the G20 major economies.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yes. So if countries like the US and others are faulting China for causing delays in this process, what is it that we can do to get them to quickly get us to the next window that we are hoping we will get in March?
Well, I mean, we went
in May.
into these negotiations on our own volition. We went in with our own sense of what we wanted. We are a sovereign nation. Our governments are made of adults, So we engaged China, on our terms, in terms of where we wanted to go with the loans that we sought to secure and all of that. So the idea that China is the cause is wrong-headed. I mean, the case cannot be sustained. The argument cannot be made. The argument wobbles. It stands on very weak legs. So that aspect of any argumentation is rather laughable. I can imagine the Chinese strategies that John and I laughing their head off and saying, Ghana, you went, in other words, these Ghanaians, do they have a problem? Are they serious? So that argument cannot be made.
Okay.
Our best bet, in my view, lies less in American pressure, because note, the Americans recently passed an act, the Chips and Something Act. I remember the second word, which is looking at squeezing China in terms of its chip making capacity and sending high technology to China and all of that, in order to, in effect, strangulate China and squeeze them, get them into a vice grip, so that they don't continue their upward technology march and rival the U.S., which the Chinese in many ways have surpassed when it comes to technology in key aspects. So the U.S. cannot, in my view, be the key queen on the chessboard to move China to support Ghana. Our best bet might be sympathy and the long historical, friendly, fraternal ties that our country has with China.
All right.
And that, to depend on that is dicey. And we are seeing that obviously, And so I think that we are clearly in a very, very difficult place.
Okay.
China is attending to its own tactical, strategic problems at the local and global level.
Okay.
And this poor Ghana, that doesn't offer in any way any far-reaching strategic benefits to them. Can at best be a peripheral entity that China might like to.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Lloyd George Du Amwa of the Center for Asian Studies, University of Ghana, Legon. He will stay on with us to join Dr. Kojo Pumpunia Sante, Director, Advocacy and Policy Engagements at the CDD, and Reverend Dr. Fred Digbe of the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers on the matter that we will discuss very shortly. I'll take some very final comments from Joseph Obeng, President, Ghana Union of Traders Association, and Dr. Humphrey Ayim-Dake, President, Association of Ghana Industries. Listening to our panelists with expertise on these matters of the economy, China relations, and everything, particularly concerning the issues that the AGI is actually doing a petition to the president. Okay, what do you have to say finally? Yes, let me start with you, Doc.
Finally, as stated, on the trade-offs, as Dr. Teo mentioned, regarding the excise duty, where we believe there could be a tweak in favor of local industries. Because if he argues from the perspective of health, we believe on the local front, you could strengthen the Food and Drugs Authority and the standardization, giving threshold for this sort of inputs to control it without using tax. Secondly, on the same front, we believe in the context of industrialization that the president championed, aside the free SHS, industrialization 1D, 1F has been his mantra. We are praying to him that he shouldn't derail the industrialization agenda through this excise duty. He could be biased in favor of local industries production. If not, a common organic liquor like Akpeteshi in the local corner will attract excise duty. And I know colleagues that are packing Akpeteshi in Afro and in other related ones. Let it not be said that that is your case as you govern. And so that will be one of the interventions we seek from the president in that respect. Secondly, considering the deal that will be clinched through the IMF, our prayer is that the expenditure that will come to government should be focused on domestic market, such that this expenditure space will propel the agriculture space for one, as against importation of finished product like cars that will not stimulate the market. I know there are schools of thought of the wastage, some are of the opinion that don't cut expenditure, but channel it with areas in the local market that will propel the recovery from this recession speedily. But if it stands as it is, as the law is, without some tweaking, that will prolong the crisis in the recession space that we find ourselves. My last take will be on the concern on China and the comments by Lloyd, that what might be the approach. We haven't seen the report of the minister. So granted that we have, that would have given us a lead on to how to engage further than to speculate. But, and in the absence of the report, we can use our business contacts and network in China, knowing the same one or two other persons that have been involved in the negotiation, to see the trend and the thinking of the Chinese community or the leadership on this said matter. And then with that engagement, we can then lobby through other parties that could speed up. So I will not go for the speculative approach that Lloyd adapted on the geopolitical and the areas of specialization and the priority of China. Once they have attached importance to international issues, that will be our focus. So I appeal to the president, please, our prayer is thou shalt not derail the industrialization agenda of Ghana. Thank you.
One of your major concerns, just for being, has been that consultation has been lacking. Civil society have joined you to say this is becoming characteristic of this government. It simply doesn't consult. Or sometimes after everything else is done and there's a complaint, then it says we are going to consult. And that is actually not consultation. They just embark on an information exercise. These appeals that you are making, what is the level of assurance you have that they will be listened to at all? And must you end at that? Because that's the question being asked. Even though whatever is happening affects the generality of the citizenry, should you stop at just appeals?
Okay. The situation that we find ourselves is quite dicey. Otherwise, there are so many things under our sleeves that we could have done, because we have given the authority to governance. The actions of Parliament was uncalled for, because Parliament did not listen to the people of Ghana.
Is it Parliament or the government? Because it was it was a majority. It was just one vote difference.
We have petitioned through the Speaker himself, and then Parliament, and then all the press releases, and then the petitions, and then the pleas did not consider. Now it can be
the MPs say they represent their constituents.
Yeah.
So what it means is that, as far as they are concerned, they have listened to you.
They never listened to us, and we are disappointed. They do not represent themselves. They do not represent their own interests, neither do they represent the political parties that they belong. It's very unfortunate that the democracy that we practice here shouldn't be seen that we are practicing democracy of imposition.
You are very familiar with how our politics works and the parliament. Everything by government, majority sees it as correct, good. Minority will see it as wrong. And this one, the minority went in even with statements that they had issued ahead of time and said they would not support this. And yet the majority passed it.
Should it be the way to go? It's very unfortunate. We are the people.
So that gives you an idea. What can you do? Because the appeals won't work, some will tell you.
You see, I've told you this thing is dicey because we still want government to get some confidence into the system by going to the IMF so that it will help all of us. So any decision that we take otherwise may not augur well for the government and then the business community at that. And so all that we are seeking is that we have to engage with government even before they are sent to this bill or law. We've submitted our petition through the newly appointed Minister of Trade to be given to the President. And then the assurance have been given that we'll have to engage us as soon as possible. We are expecting that. But then they should know that we have good intention. We don't know. Because this is a country for all of us.
It's been passed in the state that you don't want. The only way out is a revocation of it, or the president refusing to assent it and doing a whole process all over again in Parliament. Is that what you're looking for?
You know, even Theo was saying that there could be some
amendments
and all that. There's a lot, because IMF is not pushing anything that will destroy industries, and that anything that we send as an alternative that will ensure the same results that they are expecting, they will accept it. And that's why we are saying that we still have the opportunity to sit down. We are not to rush into anything that will kill us eventually. I hope you understand that.
All right.
And that's why we are calling on the government to, as early as possible, sit down with this and judge all. And then when we have a solution, then we all owe it together, and then government can even succeed on that quest.
And to think that the economic model of a country that was ravaged by genocide and left an estimated 800,000 people slaughtered is now the reference for us to look at. That country, Rwanda, is now the country ranked first on the continent among the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world, pre-COVID and post-COVID, according to the African Development Bank. What a sad situation. Thank you all for your time. We'll be right back to ask the question, how does the government and the party, NPP, continue to justify the appointment of these two individuals in the face of the evidence that is beginning to unravel even more? We'll be right back.
We are painfully aware that voluntary and constitutionally grounded revocation of these unfortunate and democratically problematic EC appointments by the President is extremely unlikely. However, nothing stops the affected appointees, namely Dr. Peter Piahini and Hajia Salima Ahmed Tijani, from voluntarily and honorably resigning from membership of the EC. This will be in the supreme interest of our country's continued democratic progress, election peace and credibility, and indeed the overall national interest. While both Dr. Piahini and Madam Salima Ahmed Tijani meet the generic benchmark qualification stipulated under Article 44(1), that is the same qualification one must satisfy to be a member of Parliament, we believe strongly that, having regard to the independent and non-partisan nature of our Electoral Commission and its mandate, the spirit of the Constitution demands far more in the way of one's suitability to be a member of the EC. We accordingly call on Dr. Peter Piahini and Hajia Salima Ahmed Tijani to do the honorable thing and resign.
The conflict of interest is something which always can be dealt with, whether it is written in black and white or not. If somebody feels that somebody has a conflict of interest, and conflict of interest does not necessarily have to be actual, it can be potential. And so it's up to the public to see what they want to do about it. If it's okay with them, why not? That's all I can say. So even Codeo could even take the matter to court if they want to. Yes. All I know is that the only thing I can do is maybe analogy on the bench. If there's somebody you've worked with before, or you're about to maybe serve on on a very important committee with, you'll be interacting very actively. If they have a matter before you, it's up to you to decide whether you will recuse yourself or not. For me, I would recuse myself, not because it's likely to influence me, but also in the justice or doing the right thing in public service. A lot of it also depends on public perception. Yes, and I think something to do with national elections and so on. Public perception is very important. That's one of the appointments that people have been talking about, plus so many other powers of appointment into certain positions where the relationship, and for it to be a healthy relationship, if there could be another methodology or process or procedure for the appointment, it will be more desirable. Yes, like even the appointment of judges. In most countries these days, it is not a direct nomination and appointment at the very top level. It's not by the head of state. It is through an independent commission, most of whose members are either from certain selected bodies, or they are even voted onto it. Yes, and it's better that way.
Thank you very much, Reverend Fred Digbe, and also Kojo Pumpuni Asante. Dr. Lloyd Amwa is still with us, and I'll begin with Reverend Fred Digbe because we hardly hear him speak publicly to the media on matters such as this. Now, the second video and the third video you watched belong to one of the appointees who have actually been sworn in, Dr. Apiahene. And you heard him speak. He had actually been contributing to media discussions representing the NPP. The NPP appear to suggest that they don't exactly know him, but that's a big lie. They know him. He has actually been, he says it by his own say-so in some of these videos, that he, together with the Deputy Attorney General, Alfred Chiayebua, represented the party during elections at the EC in the Boron region, or Sunyani, so to speak. And as we are learning, he was also a rep for the regional chairman's election or so. So there is no doubt that he is actually a through and through NPP person. So the questions being raised is that the president's appointment doesn't seem to have a sense of national interest. How about Hajia Salima? Hajia Salima, the connection that has been made so far has been to her husband, Sheikh T.B. Bamba, who is a former MCE under the NPP regime and former MP and Ghana's ambassador to Saudi Arabia until 2001. As we understand, he's supposed to be still, who is the one to Nigeria? I think we need to check that. We've heard something to that effect. And then her sister is current CEO of Maslock. And this sister also is running for elections, has indicated, according to a Daily Guide report, that she's going to contest the 2024 elections, at least for MP in the area. The husband was he first national vice chairman of the NPP, Sheikh Bamba. when Jacob Echebe Lamte and others were in the leadership, according to the NPP's own publication that lists him as National Affairs Vice Chairman at a certain particular time. Now, Dr. Fred Digbe, thanks once again. So you are saying this is totally wrong. It dents the image of the Electoral Commission. It blights their independence and neutrality. But the president would have taken this list to the Council of States, and the Council of States would have done its work and approved it. And as we know, appointments, national security also does some work over appointments to flag certain issues. All of this would have been done. So at the level of the president, at the level of the Council of States, they are satisfied that these people are okay. Why do you insist that this is wrong?
Newsfile viewers and listeners enjoy. We come out strongly because, let me just go back to what you just said, assuming that all these functionaries may have done their work. Why would they come up with such a recommendation to the president? One of the illnesses of our society is the reluctance of people who have the right information to give that right information to those in authority when they think something is at stake, either their own position or the name, or when they see that this is the thing that the appointing officer wants, they'll do it. Only very few can stand and say, no, this is wrong, and I'm willing to pay the price for it. So assuming they even did, they may have come up with a recommendation like that. Now, if they did and they came out with this recommendation, which probably therefore means that the president was misled, assuming that is true, the videos that are in the public domain that are being played now are so clear, so glaring, that if the president is so minded and people around him are so minded to listen to these tapes and hear what is being said by Dr. Piaget, the pronouns he uses, inclusive one, we. He's not talking at some objective something, making a academic argument. He's a key player, comparing with other governments and other regimes, and saying this thing must be worrying again. If as a lawyer or with lawyers around you, you know the clear specifications of the Constitution, you know the history of the EC, you know the critical role they play in it, in our election administration, and you possibly know how their ratings are plummeting, that should be worrying to you as a Democrat who should see this as one of the key pillars of democracy. Let me take the Hajia one, for instance. I think we mentioned it, but the former Chief Justice also helps us. Conflict of interest should not only be real, should be perceived. And all the people who are around her, we can see clearly, or we can hear clearly what her pedigree is. So is that why she has come up for nomination? Possibly so, but if not, and all these things are again in the public domain, they themselves must see that, no, we do not do ourselves justice by flouting all the rules of Ghana in the minds of right-thinking people of the public. Somebody may appoint us, but we live with ourselves, we live in a community, and we live for posterity to judge us about the decisions we made. Clearly, that is not in the interest of our Constitution, normal practice, and what Ghanaians desire to see in our electoral management body.
Just hold on a second for me. Dr. Kojo Pumpuni-Asante, thank you for your time. Now, you, like the CODEO, have been referring to the Afrobarometer report that tells us how the EC's image has been plummeting and getting even worse, and there is a need to do something about it. Is this your suggestion that the president is unaware of what is going on? The president will know. Is it your suggestion that the Council of State is unaware? They will know that this is going on. Is it your suggestion that the party that would have been at the forefront of, leading these people to the president for appointment would not have known about this?
Good afternoon. Good morning, and thank you, Samson. I think the president acts on behalf of the people of Ghana. The Council of State, all those institutions are supposed to act in the public interest. I don't think anybody will contest the assertion that electoral integrity, the sustenance of our democracy are all very, very key, components of our governance architecture. That's something that we have to preserve. So if the president acts in ways that threaten that objective, something that underlines our ability to develop, for the polity to have stability. I think as right-thinking Ghanaians, as election observers, as people who are interested in securing that process and making that process, as clean as possible, should be out there raising those concerns. We thought we could get an opportunity, like it happened the last time with Madam Jibensa, where the nomination actually was advertised. And then there was this indication that the president was now going to consult the Council of State. And we did put out, our concerns that the consultation was not broad enough. And we thought that if you want to get cross-party buy-in, you want to sort of remove this air of, partiality and so on of the Electoral Commission, you need to fix the process of constituting the Electoral Commission. And we did raise those concerns, and it was not heeded the last time. But this time, all we heard was people being sworn in. So there was not even an opportunity to put out the names. I'm sure all these videos and social media postings would have come out, and maybe the Council of State and all those individuals who are part of the process of making the appointment would have stepped back. So we are in a situation where the appointment has been made, and that's where we come in. So we don't know what the president knows, but after the appointment, certainly all these things have come out, and we need to be out there to let the president know that this step is not going to help anybody. It doesn't help the NPP. It doesn't help any political party. It threatens, all of us and the stability of this state. So that's the only approach that we can take. We are coming at it at late because that's the situation we have been put in. So I think for me, the MPP should really rethink and step back. I will give them the benefit of the doubt that this is a mistake. They did not probably calculate the implications of what they were doing.
No, the MPP doesn't think. The MPP doesn't think the way you are thinking. At least for its representatives, spokespersons that we have engaged on this matter. The last time we had the discussion on this show, and you heard them, they said, "Look, you are trying to bring up what is not necessary. The guy is qualified. The fact that he has any, relationship with the NPP." Is inconsequential. Of course, they deny the closeness of his relationship in the NPP. They deny that, but we know the evidence is just overwhelming that it's untenable how anybody would try to deny these things, because the gentleman himself cannot deny what it is. So they don't think the way you are thinking.
The issue is not
what can be done?
Yeah. The issue is not competent. I mean, I in my own estimation, having been involved in this process for so long a time, I have to say that for me, seriously, competence would, is something that we also have to factor in later on. But the most fundamental issue is about neutrality. We are talking about an independent electoral commission. The Constitution has worked backwards, forward, left, right, to create a system checks and balances that ensure that that neutrality is protected. It is the only institution within the Constitution where the Constitution requires the Council of State to advise the President, not consult. So why would the framers of the Constitution go through all these things to set up this model? Because the Electoral Commission is the one that referees competition between political parties. So at the base of it is the process of selecting, who governs the country, and it's political parties that are competing. So if you say partisanship is not relevant, then why doesn't the MPP put their general secretary on there? Because it's the same. Right?
How will you respond? How will you respond to those who say, how about even the court, even the apex court, the Supreme Court? There are people who have been known to have been members of a party on both sides, or even other parties, political parties, who actually attempted or contested elections on the ticket of these parties, who have eventually become judges in our courts. So what are you talking about?
Well, no, but I'm sure, Samson, I'm not the only person that have raised this issue, or anybody who has raised this issue. That matter has also been raised by, other citizens of this country. And Reverend David is very right that the thing we do here in this country is to play ostrich. People sit there and observe things going wrong, and then later on, when things are difficult to resolve, then we are all screaming. But at that time, the damage has already been done. So this is, when something is blatantly wrong, sometimes I don't understand why we even go in circles. But the person, as the former Chief Justice said, she will recuse herself, or because if a party matter came before any of those judges, of course, even by the rules of court, that person, somebody would have a grounds to challenge that person sitting on the case. Just like if the person had familiar relations that were involved on the matter, they would have grounds. So it's the same issue. I don't think you separate that from this one. But the peculiarity,
Doc, in the courts, when it comes to the judges, the question of perception is not held. When it comes to the judges, the actual is important in upholding a decision to say a judge should recuse themselves. But Justice Sophia Akufu was saying, for herself, if she found herself in such a situation, she would recuse herself. There are judges who do that. A matter comes before them, and they take the view that they have had some relation, or a party in the process is related somehow or some way, and they themselves, tell the people that I want to recuse myself, and they recuse themselves. I've had a judge ask me that he wants to recuse himself, and I say no. I know his relationship with the process. However, I want him to sit because I could trust his independence and his impartiality. So yes. Can this also apply here, where matters come up and these people will say they will recuse themselves?
No. It doesn't apply, and I'll explain shortly. But just on the matter of the judges, you see, it's why are the judges making these choices? Because the perception of partiality is one that is not only to the judge, but to the entire judicial system. If people perceive that because of these kinds of interests, you are making judgments, even if what they are saying is not true, but that is what it communicates because of these entanglements that the judges have. It destroys the integrity of the whole judiciary. So if you are getting these cases, that's why there's a lot of effort to try to deal with perceptions, not just for the individual judge that is determining a case, but for the institution itself. On the matter of the Electoral Commission, it's even more pronounced. Partisanship is even more pronounced. Because just imagine if you had Kotoko and Haas going to play, and the referee, the referee's brother or the referee's whatever, is in one of the teams or something like that. Do you think that even if the referee is the most, celebrated the impartial referee, the other side will feel happy. Because we are talking about a referee that, oversees competition between parties. So partisanship so there are two ways if you look at the electoral models across Africa. There are two ways, and that's not just Africa. There are two ways you deal with it.
Okay.
It's either you have an IPAC-type electoral commission where all the parties are represented and they can all have a say in how the electoral commission is determined.
All right.
But if you go the independent way, you can't have partisanship there.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante of the CDD. I'm going back to Reverend Dr. Fred Digbe, and then we'll have Lloyd Amwa share his views. We have heard, professors like Ransford Jampo. We have heard Dr. Osai Kwapong. They all refer to the decrease in the ratings, the trust ratings for the Electoral Commission from 48% in 2004 to 10% in 2022. And they say this could further decrease if these events are not well taken care of. This is a major point that you take on, but they also look at this. But on the question of your appeal, they say appealing to them to resign may not happen. So how are you going to go around it? We know that the trust issues came to a head when Charlotte Osei's issue came up. I just refer quickly to the U.S. country reports on human rights practices for 2019. United States Department, the thing that they issue regularly. It said, and I'm quoting from that report, it says, the June 2018 ouster of the Electoral Commission chairperson and the president's subsequent filling of the EC with persons considered to be biased in favor of the ruling party raised questions about whether the body might be used to stifle voter registration in areas of opposition support. The EC's effort to register voters and conduct a December 2018 referendum on new regions met with mixed reactions and some allegations of malpractice. The technical challenges hampered the EC's limited voter registration, among others, pages 13 and 14 of that report. So it doesn't look like you may get these people resign, despite all of these issues. Yet your call is for a resignation.
Yeah. There's always a beginning. And we hope with the preponderance of evidence. This will not be the first case where there's so much overwhelming evidence. There are many other steps that could be taken, and the coalition partners can look at it. But putting it out there, we think the moral argument, the preponderance of evidence, putting it out there, will help these qualified Ghanaians know that there are other places they can serve the nation in their capacity as people who have political affiliation. Nobody is blaming them for their partisan affiliation. But to serve on the executive, on the EC, when it is clearly stated in black and white, when they can read it, when they know the role of the EC, we are just playing back to them and say, please step down and do the honorable thing. And posterity would reward you for being the people who did the right thing. The other option, like I said, we had the Chief Justice and others have suggested other things to us. I cannot say them now because this, mind you, I don't want to tout the group of people who are talking, but you're talking about Codeo, talking about Star Ghana, and you are talking about IDEX, CFI. We've been involved in this, and there are many others who are just, they will love this country, and we see that where we are headed, not just in this case, but many other cases, and particularly where we are now, we are on a very dangerous ground, and we should not sacrifice one of the only things that has held us together, peaceful elections, where we can develop, where we can even go to IMF 17 times and develop and do things. If we throw this one away also, what else? And if people are able and they are mindful to resign peacefully, I think it will be a feather in their own caps.
Mm. There are some who say, yes, credible voices like yours, good, but will not be good enough because, look, the gentleman and the lady are clearly aware of their situation and yet accepted these appointments. Those who appointed them, those who endorsed them, approved them, all of them would have become aware of these things and went ahead and put them there. So maybe you should be thinking about what the CJ is talking about more seriously. The last time we discussed this year, the scripture about avoiding the appearance of evil, not evil itself, was pronounced. But if you are going to the court, there's a suggestion that you could look at the provision in Article 296, which requires that the discretionary power of the president, and it says that the discretionary power shall be deemed to imply a duty to be fair and candid. The exercise of the discretionary power shall not be arbitrary, capricious, or biased, whether by resentment, prejudice, or personal dislike, and shall be in accordance with due process of law. And you are also being referred to Article 297 of the Constitution about the conduct of public officers, among others. No, Article 284 about the conduct of public officers, which gives an idea how to conduct yourself. A public officer shall not put himself in a position where his personal interest conflicts or is likely to conflict with the performance of his functions. So you should be thinking more about, a formidable process rather than the persuasion.
Thank you for drawing our attention to whatever else is available. Like you said, we didn't want to go, we went public to give the key players. You see, sometimes you can say things that would even, quote unquote, damage the reputation of our state and national institutions. Because like you said from the beginning, it is assumed that national security is assumed that the Council of State, and for that matter, the President's advisors, would have done due diligence and passed this report on to them. Okay, fine. We are just assuming that that work was not done. And so let us now throw this one in there. It does not mean we are not aware of other possible ways of dealing with it. There are precedents for this. We are aware of it. The coalition can trigger all of these things. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt, rather than coming out and, excuse my language, start bashing this institution and personnel. No. But when persuasion fails, like you said, I will not finish that sentence. There are other means that can be applied. And when we cross that river, this week of action or inaction, and we'll see where we'll take it to as a coalition when we gather to see what our next steps can be.
By Article 297, the power to appoint includes the power to remove. Why are you not asking the president to simply revoke these appointments, but pleading with the appointees to rather resign?
That's a very useful input. Like I said, I mean, we will regather and look at some of the other options that we have.
Okay. Reverend Fred Digbe, thank you so very much for your time. Let's now bring in Dr. Lloyd Amwa. And Dr. Lloyd Amwa, what do you say is the way out? Do you feel this is okay, we can manage, it's okay, we shouldn't be too bothered about it? Like the president sought to preempt the process or this debate. He began by saying elections are not about those who count. It's about those who vote. So it doesn't matter whoever is put there, they can't do anything. And we have heard people in the MPP now tout that. They say it's not about the person in there. And the question people will ask is, are they forgetting themselves? How they, like the US report said, Charlotte Osei was literally hounded out of the place. She was ousted. If being there, and having any, inclinations, partisan, will not do anything, why did we go through that process, which led to Jean Mensa now being there?
Yeah, I mean, something, I think you raised the point, and your questions are relevant. What we see, obviously, is a deeply worrying moral deficit that in many ways the party, the NPP, is reflecting, and which is also being shown in the president and the choice that he has made. There's something about the night, about the EC, and we all know this. So the Charlotte Osei matter, and even going back early, when we decided to move into the constitutional era, 92, when the constitution was adopted, and then 93, when it came into force. All these questions of who becomes EC chair and the rest of them came up. But even historically, when you go way back in the Nkrumah era and all of that, the NPP, which claims essentially that it has roots with and connections with the PP, UP, LNM, and all of that, these are questions that were raised in the Nkrumah era, where the case was made strenuously and stridently that Nkrumah was partying state institution with party folk and the rest of them. A typical example was the cocoa processing company, where Jim, who was a CPP man, was running the place and reportedly sending money to the CPP for elections and all of that. So it's worrying that lessons do not seem to have been learned on these issues. The EC is a tinderbox, really. So when you were talking to Dr. Asante, Reverend Degbe, you raised the issue of the Supreme Court and all of that, and try to link that to whether a person's partisanship does not also play out in those institutions. Well, they do, but the EC is a particularly sensitive institution, and going into the next election, there's a sense in which there's this breaking the age and all of that, and the stakes are essentially very, very, very high for there to be any whiff of signs that those in power want to maintain their power by any means necessary. And I think this is what these appointments clearly throw us into a rather difficult and potentially, easily inflammable situation regarding the elections next year.
So these appeals, if you listen to the language of Codeo, they seem to be so sure that the president will not exercise his power to revoke the appointment, because they said that is almost an impossibility. Therefore, the appointees should be the ones who should rather exercise their discretion to resign in the national interest.
On the contrary, there's a sense in which I see their argument. But as I indicated in my prefatory take, the moral deficit is also weighing on the president. And I think that he should take the decision. The appointees also have a role to recuse themselves, from a moral, angle. But failing which, I think the president can easily take his pen and say, look here, I appointed you, I want to disappoint you. So go home. And in that sense, I think the balance really weighs more on the president. This is a man who's been in the trenches for decades.
Okay.
We know him. His fourth case, 31st December, as a holiday, Rawlings' choices. He's been in the trenches.
That's right.
He should know, and know that this clearly cannot hold. He knows it in the deepest recesses of his mind as a political operator.
All right.
So I think I'll put it squarely on him to just take the green pen and revoke these obviously, odious appointments.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lloyd George Edu Amwa, with the Center for Asian Studies, University of Ghana, Legon. Reverend Dr. Fred Digbe is with the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers. Dr. Pumpuni Asante, Director, Advocacy and Policy Engagement of the CDD. I've heard the questions being asked. In Kenya today, the opposition have literally forced the government to pause and agree on something that has to be done with their election body. And guess what? In their election body, the chairperson or whoever is heading is not appointed by the president. They appoint one from among themselves once they are constituted, and they have a nice way of doing so. The last time we discussed this, I asked the questions about, I think we're discussing how the minority MPs were voting to approve the ministers by the president when they had come publicly to say that the public wanted them disapproved. And I asked the question, are they really, a viable, a formidable opposition? Are they a responsible opposition? Are they doing their work? Maybe they should think about it. What exactly are they doing about some of these things? It bothers all of us, but what are they doing as an opposition? Except criticizing the clergy, they are not speaking enough. Criticizing some civil societies, they are not criticizing enough. What are they doing? This is Codeo that brought up all of these, that is bringing up the mass of, this, as it were, support to discuss this matter. So I think the opposition should also be asking itself very important questions about how it is doing its business as an opposition. You just organize one press conference, you make a comment, and the end of it is gone. That's it. Nothing gets happened, and you are okay with it. All right. This show, as always, is brought to you by this kind of sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group, as close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, Ashas University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa, Robert & Sons, Obstacle Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider. For 31 years, My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on MTN to join Duraplus. How you get your water matters. Remember, where Duraplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, Roofing, Papa Fie. Rehoboth Social Housing. Your housing dreams become reality. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., join me and my very special guest, His Lordship Alexander Osei Tutu, on our weekly legal clinic, The Law Show. Join us tomorrow. We are talking about intermeddling, dealing with the property of the dead, part 2. The Supreme Court has given a decision on that. We are dissecting it. So join us tomorrow, 2 p.m. on this same network. Our special guest is Lordship Justice Alexander Osei Tutu. Will be joined by Albert Jemfi. Thank you. Have a good afternoon. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini.